So, what big events happened during your childhood?
Well, probably one of the things that I remember most was Neil Armstrong landing on the moon. And I remember watching that in the living room with my parents and some family friends, and I seem to remember and this was in Australia, in Mount Gambier, Australia, and I seem to remember that it was in the morning, the middle of the morning, and we watched it on the black and white TV, and I can remember how exciting it was. And then they finally showed the Apollo module landing, and Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, and he said, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. It was very exciting, so I do remember that quite clearly.
Wow, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of pastimes did you like? What are your favorite pastimes?
So I grew up in a country town in South Australia called Mount Gambier, and the sort of pastimes that we did were a lot like kids over here do. Playing sports, running around the neighbourhood, riding our bikes. But one of the things that they had in Mount Gambier, which was pretty unique, was a series of volcanic craters that we used to call the lakes. And we called them the lakes because they had 5 craters and they're all filled with lakes. And so one of the things we used to do on the weekend was hike up to the lakes and go down the trails and little sort of paths and everything, and it was a lot of fun to climb down the mountain, and then we might go swimming in the lake, and then we'd climb back and go home, and that was like a day's worth of adventure. So that was something unique to Mount Gambier. And also close by, about 18 miles away, was the coast, the South Australian coast, and there was a town there called Port Macdonald, and we used to go down there and walk around and go swimming in places along the coast.
What did you eat that was different than America? Because everyone knows what Americans eat.
Okay, well, I have to be honest and say we probably ate pretty similar things to what they eat in America.
What about the Pro-Mites?
However, there were a few unique things that made what we eat a little bit different. One of them was the Vegemite, or in fact in my case it was Pro-Mite, which is a stronger flavour than Vegemite. And a lot of people wonder why a thick black oil-like looking thing spread on toast is appetizing. But it turns out that it's very tasty, and so it was very common in Australia, as different to America, to have Vegemite or Pro-Mite on toast in the morning for breakfast. So that was something. And also for snacks, at the time I grew up there was no McDonald's or Burger King. Actually there was Kentucky Fried Chicken, but that was about the only fast food place that Mount Gambier had, although now of course they've got all the standard ones. But one of the other things that they have there is something called fish and chips, and so it was very common to go down and get fish and chips. And I should say that the fish that we used to get was called flake, and flake is actually shark, and so fish and chips was really some shark. So it turns out that we ate the sharks, not the other way around.
Did you have any pets?
I did.
When you were a kid?
I actually had a cat called Blackie. Blackie wasn't black, but when Blackie was a kitten, Blackie was black, so that's why we called the cat Blackie. Although when people saw the cat, they were kind of puzzled about the name Blackie. I also had, my grandmother lived with us, and she had a sulphur-crested cockatoo called Isaac, and everyone called him Ike. And Ike was a very friendly bird, and Ike used to get given what we call a biscuit, which is what you would call a cookie, every morning. And Ike was very excited when he got his biscuit, and you'd give it to him, and he'd reach out his paw, and he'd take it, and he'd just sit there and just start eating it. He went around the edge around and around and around until there was nothing left. He was very happy when he had his coffee biscuit. And you could say, "Give us a kiss, Ikey," and you'd put your face there, and Ikey would just give you a little peck like that, and he liked getting his belly scratched. He'd lift his wings. And Ikey was 33 years old, and he was a nice bird. I also had guinea pigs, and the guinea pigs were good because every morning they'd come up to the back door squeaking. So they had a cage that was open, and they could actually roam around the backyard, and anytime anything threatened them, they'd run to their cage, and it was constructed so that it was pretty safe from dogs and cats. But every morning they would be at the back door squeaking, expecting some milk and bread, which my grandmother used to give them. And so you'd have like these 10 guinea pigs all at the back door squeaking, and she would take out a bowl of warm milk with bread, and for some reason, I don't know why, she put cinnamon in it, because I think she probably thought that was tastier. And so that was an example of pets. Never had a dog. Well, actually I did have a dog, but he was stolen. I never had another dog.
Aww.
He was called Robbie.
What kind of car did you drive?
My dad was actually, when I was a kid, had a car dealership called McKinnon Motors, so we drove lots of different cars, usually associated with the car dealership. So various cars. Some Australian cars, some imported cars. So nothing special.
Mm. What kind of bands or music did you listen to?
Well, when I was a teenager, some of the popular bands were Australian bands such as AC/DC and the Angels, and in fact, even in the small country town before AC/DC were really, really popular, they used to come and play like every 6 months. AC/DC would be playing there, and so they were very popular. But so are a lot of the American bands. Meatloaf was popular. A lot of British bands were popular too. But there was a big emphasis on Australian music.
Do you remember any of the prices for the small things like toys or gas or candy or other stuff like that?
Well, I don't remember a lot of the prices. Gas is always a lot more expensive in Australia, always has been, than America. It's about 4 times as expensive. Not quite as bad as Europe, but still it's quite expensive. I remember that when I was a kid, you used to get 20 cents worth of fish and chips. And that would be 1 piece of fish and quite a large serving of chips, which are fries. And so you used to get 20 cents worth of fish and chips, and you could get a little bag of chips for 5 cents. And to put that in perspective now, I think a piece of fish is something like $5, and the minimum chips is something like $3 or $4. So 20 cents worth of fish and chips is now something like $10. So prices have changed. I remember that when they used to sell albums, records, which were vinyl, large vinyl discs, not CDs, they were quite expensive, and they were like $5.99, which was considered expensive. But apart from that, I don't really recall that many prices.
Wow, that's very interesting.
I know.
I probably won't remember any prices when I'm an adult either,
No,
so don't feel bad about that.
Okay.